All right, so if you are watching this video, you are probably a leader at some capacity here at Revolution Church. And as a leader, especially a leader in ministry, let me tell you one of the most important things that you need to know. Write these three words down right now. I need rest. Write that down. I need rest. Why do you need rest? Well, first of all, because God said so. It is a sin to avoid rest, but we don't talk about that sin, and when we do talk about it, we treat it like it's no big deal, almost like it's a cute sin, like, oh, I know I need to rest, I know I need to take a Sabbath, but I'm just so busy, like we treat it like it's a cute little innocent sin. Or sometimes we even treat this sin like it's some sort of badge of honor. Sometimes we even praise people who never rest, and we praise people who never take a Sabbath or a day off. They're just such a hard worker, they're such a go-getter, but I think to God, that's like us being proud of someone for cheating on their spouse. I think to God that's like us being proud of someone for murdering someone else. Avoiding rest is just as much of a sin as sleeping with someone you're not married to. Avoiding rest in God's eyes is just as much of a sin as ending the life of another human being, as murdering someone. God is so serious about his people, about you taking rest, taking something called a Sabbath, which is a day, a full day out of your week for complete rest. There are a few things in the Old Covenant, Old Testament law that people were stoned for, killed for as a consequence. And listen to this, not taking a Sabbath, not taking a day to have complete rest was one of those things. Exodus 31:15 says, you have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. But the seventh day must be a Sabbath day of complete rest, a holy day dedicated to the Lord. Anyone who works on the Sabbath must be put to death. That's how serious God takes rest and us avoiding rest. And even though Jesus has fulfilled the law for us and we're not technically under the law anymore, we still understand from the law this is something that God takes really, really, really seriously, so seriously that he even modeled this for us. I mean, do you think that God really needed 7 days to make the earth? Of course not. Do you think that God was out of breath and he needed to rest on that seventh day? Of course not. He did this to model for us what he wants our weeks of our lives to look like. Also, let me say this too. We may not be under the old covenant law anymore. Jesus may have fulfilled that, and we may not have to be stoned to death if we avoid rest today, but not taking a Sabbath still results in death today under the new covenant. Write this down if you're taking notes. The consequence for avoiding rest always has been and still is death. It just looks differently than it did back then. Not taking time to rest, not taking a Sabbath, not taking vacations, not having that finish line that you look forward to that's going to get you through the work week or the work month or whatever. Not taking those, not having those finish lines and taking those Sabbaths will slowly put you to death. And this is why God takes it so seriously, because he created our bodies and he created our brains and he created our emotions, and he knows what avoiding rest will do to our bodies and will do to our brains and will do to our emotions. He knows the damage that avoiding rest will do to our lives. So leader who is watching this video right now, ask yourself this question. Is it possible that maybe you're not resting like you should? And as a result of you avoiding rest, is it possible that you are slowly being put to death by not resting? Let me go even deeper with this. Is it possible that your ministry, whatever ministry that you're over or whatever ministry that you're serving in, is it possibly that your ministry is slowly being put to death because of your lack of rest? Is it possible that the team that's under you or the small group that's under you, is it possible that they're being put to death because of your lack of rest? Is that possible? Because the speed of the leader is the speed of the team, right? Is it possible that your effectiveness in ministry is being slowly put to death by your lack of rest? Is it possible that your marriage and your family are being slowly put to death because of your lack of rest? Is your social life and your friendships being slowly put to death by your lack of rest? Is your joy being slowly put to death by your lack of rest? The consequence for avoiding rest always has been and still is death. Another word for death, by the way, is burnout. Burnout. If you don't want death in your life, if you don't want burnout in your ministry, if you don't want to burn out in what God is calling you to do, if you don't want to burn out in your calling, then you got to rest. You can either avoid rest or you can avoid burnout, but you can't avoid both. It's one or the other. Are you going to rest, or are you going to allow yourself to burn out of the leadership role that God has called you and allowed you and given you the privilege of stepping into? So that's the why behind rest, because it's very serious. It's a very serious sin to God, and because it will result in death and burnout. That's the why. Let's talk about the how. How do we avoid rest? And here's the biggest tip that I could give you. Plan rest. You got to plan rest like you plan work. Plan rest like you plan work. You know exactly when you're going to work, right? You know exactly when you're going to work. You know exactly when you're going to serve. You know, if you're serving in kids, you know you're on the schedule. You know exactly when you're going to serve, right? But do you know exactly when you're going to rest next? You know, do you have that planned? Is it scheduled? You got to plan rest like you plan work. Look, put it on a calendar. You know, on my calendar, it shows the day of the week that I have planned to rest, and I have it written down. For me, it's usually a Saturday. That's usually a day when I try to say, okay, this is going to be the day where I rest. But I have a set day on my calendar for every week. This is my Sabbath. This is my planned Sabbath. So buy a calendar, write that down. If you don't have money for a calendar, use the calendar on your phone. It works great, okay? But plan rest like you plan work. That's my advice. And then protect that time that you have scheduled. Write this down if you're taking notes. You got to plan it and you got to protect it. Plan it and protect it. Plan rest and protect your plan. Protect the day that you put on the calendar. Say no. You know, say no to things. If someone asks you to do something, say no. I'm not doing that. This is my Sabbath. I'm protecting my Sabbath. I'm honoring God. I'm protecting my rest. You got to learn how to say no, because when you say yes to a request from a human being to break your planned Sabbath, you are choosing to obey a human being over God, right? When it comes to how to rest, that's my best advice. Plan it and then protect it. Plan it and protect it. But let me say one more thing too. Sometimes you may need to invest in rest. You may need to invest in rest. One of my big finish lines for my entire year is in July, where me and Michaela, my wife, we go back to our hometown, Savannah, Georgia, for our anniversary. We rent a house on the water. We have reservations at one of our favorite seafood restaurants. It's my biggest finish line. And the thing is, we have to invest in that trip. It's not, it's not cheap. So we invest in that trip. We save for that trip, but it's worth it because you got to have those kind of finish lines to look forward to. So you got to invest in rest sometimes. That's how to rest. Now let's talk about what rest is. Is rest sleep? Is rest sleep? That's the first thing people think of when you think of rest. Is it sleep? Yeah, that's part of it. And for some people, sleep is rest, And for some people, their Sabbath is just taking a whole day to sleep, and that's great for them. But you can rest while you're awake too. And I think for most people, this is probably what their Sabbath is going to be. You got to learn how to rest. You got to learn how to take a Sabbath while you're awake. And for most people, their Sabbath is not just going to be a full day of sleeping because of just life circumstances. That's not possible. So you can rest while you're awake. For example, sometimes for me, it's driving out to the lake, maybe fishing if it's the right time for that. Sometimes it's just getting out in my kayak. Sometimes, y'all, for me, it's just ordering Marco's Pizza, which, by the way, is the best pizza in Crossville, and laying down on the couch and watching Netflix all day. Sometimes that's what it is for me. It can look a lot of different ways. For you, maybe it's golf, maybe it's hiking, maybe it's biking, whatever. But here's the big question that you got to ask. Does it give your brain a break? Rest is a brain break. Rest rest is a brain break. So figure out what gives your brain a break, what gives your body a break from the stress and from the burdens of the rest of the week that you experience throughout the rest of the week, and then plan a day that will be full of whatever that thing is, and then protect that day, maybe even invest in that day if you have to, and do what God says to do. Take a Sabbath and rest, so that you can avoid death in your life, and so that you can avoid things like burnout in what God has called you to do with your life. If you do that, I believe God will bless your rest. Write that down. God will bless your rest. God will bless your rest. Think of Chick-fil-A. There's a reason that Chick-fil-A is the most successful fast food restaurant, and I for one think the food's a little overrated. Okay, I'm not a huge Chick-fil-A fan. It's good, but it's definitely not the best. But they're the most successful fast food restaurant, and they're the only fast food restaurant that I know of that takes a Sabbath. And I think the reason is because God blesses their rest. God blesses their decision to take a Sabbath and honor His command to rest. And so if you do these things, if you rest, God will bless it. So hopefully that all helps you.